Yo, hey, it is your boy, Killer Cam. It is Anime Parley. If you've clicked on this video, you know we're coming in with a particularly hot, spicy, caliente take. And I'll be honest, I am the biggest critic of this particular
He is
form.
the aggressor in this situation.
I am the problem. So we'll talk about it. If you click this video, you're probably pissed off and you're hopping mad and waiting for a legitimate argument to be made, and you're gonna get one. You're in the right place for that. But like I said, it's your boy Killer Cam. I'm here with the crew.
Peace and blessings. It's your boy Wild and Free. Well,
Yo, it's Mugiwara. What's up?
We are Sans being without, by the way, for the layman. We are Sans, our boy Bash Ketchum today. He is out somewhere in the world, and he will be back next week. But for today, we're talking Gear 4th, everybody. We're talking about the pros and cons of Gear 4th and really its place within the power-up canon of Luffy and One Piece as a whole. So here's the thing. I'm just going to get right into it. I personally think Gear 4th sucks. And I'm going to explain why. I know that there are people out there. I'm going to call them... I've been thinking about this name for a little bit, and I finally settled on a good... I'm going to say it. I finally settled on a good name, and just so that we all know I love One Piece, but there's a certain aspect of the fandom, and yes, if you're that person, I'm sorry, I am talking about you.
he's not sorry.
I'm going to call them... I'm going to call them bartards. And that is people that are just so crazy about One Piece and Oda, and that Oda can do no wrong. It's the kind of person who calls him Goda, and that Luffy is just like perfect in every way, and that everything that's planned for him is just seamless and without any kind of inconsistency. I'm talking about those
For the
people.
record, Mugiwara and I do not condone this behavior.
Yeah, they disagree, but
sense.
everyone will agree because it'll just be undeniable by the end of this video. So here's the reason why I am particularly antagonistic towards Gear 4th. Okay, so I want to first start off, and I want to ground us in what am I comparing it to? Well, I'm comparing it to obviously Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd, the gears that kind of popularized and really transformed the way that we see Luffy, and really transformed the series in a way that obviously brought us its best fight, which I think is inarguably Luffy versus Lucci. The first time, at least. I don't think anyone can make the argument that there's a better fight than that. I'm sorry, it just is what it is, just because it's just great in every way, and it has a lot of emotion. And if you guys want to make an argument about which fight is better, and if you say Katakuri, I'm just going to just delete this recording like right on the spot. But that being said, I mean, just purely, if you look at any ranking, it's obviously Lucci versus Luffy. And the reason why is because it is first our introduction to Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd, but then the application of it in conjunction, you could see both within the fight, whatever. But the point being is we are comparing Gear 2nd and 3rd in the way in which they're introduced to Gear 4th, and we're kind of measuring to see how they stand up. We're not really going to be talking about Gear 5th in this context. Yeah, obviously, we'll kind of mention it a little bit, but we're really just talking about how Gear 4th landed, particularly as the first gear that we're introduced to, first new gear of the new world, obviously post-time skip. So, Gear 2nd, how is it introduced? Gear 2nd is introduced more or less by virtue of necessity. Luffy is defeated in his attempt to rescue Robin by Lucci very easily and quickly and handily, and by Bueno. We get the introduction of, CP9 and their abilities, and Luffy just has no answer for them. They're faster than him. They have stronger attacks than him. He's trying to hit them. It's doing nothing in terms of their use of Takai, right? So the steel strengthening of their bodies. So we kind of get this introduction of their unique powers and abilities, and Luffy not having an answer for them. Within this time frame, and we don't really see Luffy develop this, it's just something that he kind of innovates on the spot. We see within the time frame of his fight, kind of skirmish, if you will, with CP9 and his eventual kind of 1v1 with Bueno. And as fans, we're like, okay, well, how is this going to work? How is Luffy going to, break through Takai? How is he going to address or combat their speed or their, abilities like Soru or all the other kind of stuff? And in that fight, and Mr. Waterford, I know you're trying to get a point, and I'll break in a second, but in that fight, here's what we see. We see Luffy transform in the simplest terms. He pumps his legs And, when you're first watching this, and, obviously we're all seasoned fans here. If you're viewing this is like, just the lore, the canon. It's like epic stuff, like foundational aspects of One Piece, particularly this fight, because it's the first time we see Luffy be fighting in a way that is, it's kind of like hyper shonen, because before it's kind of like...
Not the first time, second time.
The first time we're seeing Gear Second?
No, his battle awareness, and you're saying it's the first time we're seeing him be...
No, I'm saying it's the first time that we're seeing him in this way where, like, it's kind of... I'm going to call it hyper shonen, because prior to that, I know you're probably talking about, like, Crocodile and stuff like that. I'm talking about Luffy kind of not fighting in, like, kind of like a goofy kind of way, right? And to some degree, I don't mean him being mentally goofy. I mean... just the stretching and like, I'm going to like do this particular weird, creative kind of attack, but like really just kind of silly stuff. And like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, whatever.
All right.
Okay. We see him unlock an ability that, and when I say hyper shonen, what are we talking about? Super strength, super speed. He gets both of those in this fight, right? He's we really kind of even haven't seen him in this particular way fight, just because the way in which he's speed blitzing, like he like disappears. This is like Dragon Ball Z stuff.
Yeah.
He's disappearing, right? Speed blitzing Blano, like immediately is just right on him, like punches him right in the stomach, breaks through Takai easily. And we're just shown this like, to be honest, it's kind of like Naruto level, the way in which it's kind of shown. It's perfect animation, perfect fight choreography. And it shows us a side of Luffy that we just hadn't seen before. And it really adds hype to the series in a way that it just hadn't been there before, because all of his other attacks were a little bit more labored, right? It's Gomu Gomu bazooka. I've got to like charge up and throw my hands back and then bust him forward or whatever, or Gatling, whatever. It obviously wasn't as fast. It looks a little silly because it's just rubbery. This is such a unique way to look at Luffy. It's novel, and it kind of broke the mold of what we would see later, which is like an increasing focus on combat, up close, brawler kind of fights, and obviously that leads us to the Rob Lucci fight. I want to break here for a second. What do you guys think about that? Like, just in terms of that description, the moment leading up to it, what Gear Second represented as it was introduced?
I was going to agree with a lot of what you said there, except Bluno. That's what I was going to say. Maybe it's a preference thing, potato.
I thought it was Blueno.
I've always pronounced it Bluno.
Because I thought it was like
Blueno, Blueno.
Blueno. I thought it was like Spanish, but whatever, right? Like bueno, like bueno.
Bueno, like
bueno.
Very good. Muy
Yo,
bien.
his devil fruit, by the way, is pretty insane.
Oh yeah, it's dope. What he's able to do,
its potential just opens doors, like to anywhere. It's not like within sight, like Nightcrawler or something from Marvel.
Well, he's creating like a pocket dimension that no one can access. It's like he's got the perfect escape.
He's like it's different than teleporting. He's like other people can use it and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So put that. We'll put that on wax right now. I think everyone can agree that Gear Second was a transformational moment for the series. It unlocked for lack of a better word, a new gear to the way that we see Luffy, and really kind of brought out a very interesting type of combat, like in kind of energy and speed that we hadn't seen before. Mugiwara, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're moving to the next point, but I didn't get to add this situation with Gear Second was a very new. I would agree with you that it was a very new, like it was like a physical change with Luffy, whereas previously he was working with the fight with Crocodile, where it was like conceptual, and they were showing his like battle prowess and his like ability to like be wily in the battle and like think of stuff and be like very strategic. When they showed Gear Second, also at the same time, we all just accepted the crazy mentality that he was pumping blood through his body, creating steam, when that was literally him saying to himself he wants to do the same thing that Lucci is doing with his speed. And he was trying to create it for himself. And whatever he like manifested and did, like became reality. And I want to just say, like, I don't know if Oda knew what Gear 5 was going to become.
Okay.
I know, but like,
that's
we all just accepted
guys,
the
listeners
craziness.
at home, I'm hard rolling my eyes, but
No. Let me finish my concept.
Yeah,
let me finish the concept.
Go ahead.
It is a wild idea that we all accepted he was moving blood through his body and creating steam through like the level of what he was doing based off of what Lucci's power was, and he was able to perform better than him in the end. And what we see now with Gear 5, we're not thinking about all the levels he had to go through to realize, like, oh, this is what I was doing the whole time. Anyway, again,
so I think about that, and I do think that it's a valid point.
I hear you, but I gotta get. We're not even on Gear 4th yet, so like, I don't want to take up too much time.
I was about to get there.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. Like, so because Gear 3rd was introduced at the same time, right? Gear 3, Gear 2, pumping blood faster. Gear 3, pumping air into the bones, right, to make it massive and strong, right? So I thought that was a valid application. If y'all watched the previous episode, we briefly talked about Doflamingo and how, versatile his power is. At this point in the series, this felt like a viable expansion on how someone can get creative with their power. And so I all I'm saying there is that it didn't feel far-fetched. It did feel like a very battle-ready, like, improvement to his power level, which allowed us to see this very, like, hyper shonen type of fight. But it didn't seem wildly far-fetched, as though it was, like, not, like, something beyond the scope of what should be possible with rubber, right? Like, it was just like, oh wow, like, yeah, like if your blood vessels are stretchy and you're all of this, like, yeah, it makes sense that you should be able to pump things faster through it, right? That's how I looked at it.
Yeah. But what do you think about it now? It feels a little wild, and you believe that it's a part of the devil fruit, probably, that he was able to move blood through his body.
I mean,
it makes even more sense.
Yeah, but guys, just real quick, there are crazy things that happen in One Piece all the time. So I don't know. I'm going to give an example. I think her name is Miss All Sunday in the Little Garden arc. Was able to basically incapacitate Luffy, Zoro, not Usopp, I think, through paint. She had mood colored paint that wasn't a devil fruit. It was just people have strange abilities that affect people differently in the world of One Piece. So the idea that like Luffy could pump his legs, and by the way, that scene that you're talking about, where he's basically saying, I watched Lucci tap his legs, and that is basically what I copied in order to mimic, the strength that you guys have or the speed that you guys have. Blano is the person who is watching Luffy do this and is analyzing and saying, oh, okay, he's pumping his legs.
All Sunday. Sorry.
Whatever. Like, I'm talking about, right? The little girl. Okay. Whatever. Not Miss All Sunday. I forget her name, but the little girl.
Because that was Robin.
Okay. The little girl. The point being is, like, there are powers in One Piece that aren't explained with the devil fruit. They just are, right? Like Django from Seared Village arc is another example of that, where he's, like, able to hypnotize people or whatever. There are people that just do strange things in the world of One Piece, particularly within the, let's say, pre-Grand Line, right? Once you get to the Grand Line, there's somewhat subtle, like, explanations, whether it's Sanji spinning around real quick to heat up his feet, where he could able to, basically through the power of air resistance friction on his foot, make it super hot and kick people and inspire flames or whatever, right? So in the introduction of Luffy pumping his legs, that pumping his blood vessel... But
even that was proved to be... Maybe we don't know the whole story because he's a cyborg, crazy... Gurma soldier.
Yeah, I know, but
we didn't know the whole time.
I understand that, but I'm saying, like, the point overall, which I think we can all agree, is there are powers in the world of One Piece that aren't related to devil fruits, that just are. In the case of there's the king in Dressrosa, is like king,
with the punch.
Whatever. I think it's like Lisabello or something like that. He's able to 3 times a day punch like do crazy feats of like whatever, just a punch that's not hockey related at all. Right? Like he's just able to do that. That's like a special thing. So the point that I'm trying to make is, like, in the world of One Piece, we saw this a little bit more in the pre-time skip, less so in the post-time skip. But there are unexplainable abilities that people just have. So Blano looking at Luffy do this and pump his legs, like he's analyzing, and it's the first time that we really kind of get a proper explanation as to like, and you know, you see this a lot in Naruto where they like explain like what's actually happening in like a semi-realistic way. Mm-hmm. The idea that Luffy is pumping his legs with nutrients and that's ultimately allowing his body to, you know, do feats of endurance or whatever that are, you know, abnormal or, you know, more than his body should be able to handle. Specifically because I think it's Lucci who calls it out. That's saying like what you're doing is not normal and you're actually lowering your lifespan because you shouldn't be able to do this. Like you're weakening your body by basically forcing, you know, basically your nutrients or whatever. It's the reason why you're having these negative side effects, right? So that being said, that's basically our kind of introduction to Gear Second, right? And obviously it's kind of the first semi-serious explanation as to how he's able to do this. We see the application. It's iconic in terms of him pumping his legs, and it even has like a special sound effect. Then we get to see our Gear Third. And when we're introduced to Gear Third, it is through, I want to say the first application of it is through Luffy literally punching through. Like we just see the fist. He blows... You know, Mr. Waterford, you mentioned this before. He grabs his hand or whatever, takes his hand, bites down, blows air into what we find out later is his bone, which for some reason increases the mass of the arm.
It's insane.
Yes.
The idea is insane. Like
yeah.
No other Paramecia is doing things on this level. Like
sure.
When it comes out, he's got the Looney Tune powers. That's the only time it makes sense.
Sure, but let's just focus.
Like we're just accepting it. All right.
Sure. But what we're talking about is less so like its relation to it, you know, its origins as far as it being a Looney Tunes kind of power or whatever, right? And more so the impact and what it kind of or how it was introduced and you know how it resonated with, you know, at least the story or what was needed for the arc or what was needed to defeat the antagonist or whatever, right? Like we're talking about its impact. Gear Third is introduced, you know, Luffy does it, whatever, and then he punches through, and we kind of get an idea that it's not just, you know, what we've seen before, which is Luffy blows up, because he's done this before, but parts of his body, and it's just air. And it's just, there's nothing that's really there. It's nothing substantial. He blows air into his bones and is able to mimic the strength of a giant, right? And we see that because the first introduction is basically the fist that he punches Lucci with blows up the entire kind of like interior structure that they're in. And you see his fist punch through this giant building. And it's like this wow moment for everybody else who's outside watching it. That is a crazy introduction and it's awesome. And we get to see the repercussions of the use of it because he turns into like a small child, like not child, but like he shrinks for a little bit.
Chibi version.
Yeah, he shrinks for a little bit. And then basically, you know, it kind of doesn't have as much kind of broader applications as you know, obviously Gear Second did. Gear Second is ultimately what Luffy uses to finish Lucci, but it's strong and it's versatile and it's kind of like the opposing aspect of Gear Second. Gear Second is speed, it's power. You know, Gear Third is obviously a little bit more slow, but it's a lot of power or whatever, right? That's more or less how it's introduced. And it's iconic in that way because it's, you know, Luffy blowing himself up to crazy proportions to increase his attack power. Cool. That is the foundation of abilities that were introduced, and they're both iconic in different ways. But, you know, we are kind of with that starter pack all the way up into effectively Fishman Island. And there's little things that, you know, we see that they get kind of added on or improved or optimized. In the case of the post-time skip, Luffy's able to basically go into Gear Second just through going like this. He doesn't have to pump at all. It's kind of weird, but whatever, we kind of go with it. It's cool. Same thing with Gear Third. I think we see instances of Gear Third within the Fishman Island arc. Luffy gets to a point where he's applying armament hockey to... What's up?
Like, how are you going to expect for him to grow? Like, or do you always want to see how he made that level where he's able to just throw his arm out and go into second? Do you want to see how he learned that, or do you want him to actually grow forward?
Well, what we see is when he throws his arm out, you see the blood kind of moving and it pumps.
Yeah, it shoots down his arm.
Yeah.
Yes, and then it comes back
Shoots
and bounces back.
Yeah. So like, you know, we see him,
but like through his use, can you, as a viewer and a consumer, just like assume that he's like growing and not just on camera the only times he ever uses it, that's when he needs to grow? Like,
well we're kind of getting away from like the main point, because we're not arguing, right? We're not arguing like how he's able to do that, right? We're just kind of getting into how it's evolved and how it's continued to be impactful, or kind of the iconic aspects of Gear Second and Gear Third, and how they were essential aspects of his power, and how they were more or less kind of optimized and advanced and leveled up through the course of the series, getting up to obviously the introduction of Gear Fourth, right? So, you know, in the perfect case of Fishman Island, he does that, right? We see him back in Sabati Archipelago after the time skip. He's able to go into, I mean, we get to see a mark of how much he's grown, but we see him go into Gear Second just straight off rip. No pumping required. We get the instance of him using Gear Third, like I think on the coated Mary as they're descending down to Fishman Island. I think it's like to block the squid or whatever octopus. Or maybe I'm thinking about Robin. Don't know. Doesn't matter. We see him in his fight with Hody. He's able to like generate fire. I wish we could see a little bit more of this because it's a really cool aspect. But I feel like once we get Sabo, they're just kind of like, okay, he's not going to be like using Fire Fist anymore. But we even get like Gear Second with Armament Hockey. It looks like we just lost Mugiwara, but hopefully he comes back. But we get basically, Luffy basically being able to like set fire to his hand and deliver like flame and beam punches through.
And the way that they explain that.
Yeah, I mean, like it's moving. It's Armament Hockey.
The twist. It was the twisting of the arm.
Yes.
And the length in which he stretched it and the friction.
Yes.
Of it busting
back through the air. So,
right.
So you get like these interesting applications or whatever. So again, the point is Gear Second and Gear Third were so iconic, right? And so well explained and developed that they could be developed upon, particularly as we're moving through the series. And again, this is from pre-time skip to post-time skip. They're still in use all the way up to Dressrosa. Dressrosa, we get, again, and now we're getting into Gear Fourth, but we get the introduction of basically, Doflamingo's powers, right? We haven't really seen too many of them. We see kind of limited applications. We get into the fight with the tag team of, Luffy and Law versus Doflamingo and Treble. And then you have the kind of split or whatever, and they're kind of tag team, they're getting off their attacks or whatever. But we realize really quickly Doflamingo is out of Luffy's league. He is incredibly powerful, and Luffy needs something else in order to actually do damage. Because we see him use Red Hawk, and it hurts Doflamingo, but then he just repairs himself, right? So there's a lack of power that's there. We don't really see him use Gear Third just because, for the most part, it's not super practical in many instances. But we learn very quickly that Luffy needs something else. And we're all kind of expecting, like, there's got to be a Gear Fourth. We just got through the time skip. There's got to be a Gear Fourth. We didn't see it in Fishman Island because he didn't necessarily need it. But this is a fight that he's going to have to break out something special. And we knew that it was coming. Yeah. The way in which it gets introduced is Luffy, and I had this wrong the last time we discussed it, but it's not him blowing through his thumb. It's him blowing through his forearm. And he blows through his muscle mass. He blows through his muscle.
Yeah, but it's like, it's not even a thing, dude. There's never like a sprite of blood or anything. Like, he just puts his mouth on his arm and he blows it up.
Which is a little weird, to be honest.
It's weird. It's strange.
Because he bites his thumb. We see him clearly, and we're like, we see that in Naruto where they're like draw blood and stuff like that. But it's like, it's like, are you biting like a hole in your thumb? Like, how's this work? But it's a little weird. But like, whatever. You just kind of go with it. He blows air into his forearm, and then his forearm blows up, and then his whole body changes. Whatever. Okay, so let's talk about it. Do we like the actual? Because we're going to get into like how it's used and its impact and how it's felt or whatever. Because I don't know. I go back and I look at Dressrosa and I think about the use of Gear Fourth. And I don't know. I mean, it's just not really that memorable and iconic to me. But that being said, we're going to get into that. But like, let's just speak on the visuals. Luffy's big. He's muscular. He's got like kind of wildish hair. His skin is like kind of this dark scarlet kind of like black in terms of the hockey use above his body. He's got the flames. It almost looks like something out of like a Japanese folklore. You even have like the kind of Japanese folklore music, like whatever, right?
Yeah.
Introduced when he is in his form, and you have like him say, bound man, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are our thoughts on that? Just the introduction, the visuals of it. If I can, I'll put it on the screen somewhere. But like, what are our thoughts on that?
Chef's kiss.
Really?
I loved it. Yes, I absolutely loved it. It was an incredible evolution. I think the practicality of Gear 4, as from what we have seen from Gear 2 to Gear 3 to Gear 4, just made sense, right? Like, oh yeah, okay, first he pumped his blood faster, then he pumped his bones faster. Oh yeah, the muscles, right? And so it's like a very, of course, kind of application, right? Oh yeah, like that makes sense. That's a natural progression of how you might think to evolve this power. If you started on the thread line of, oh, how can I enhance my physical capabilities as a rubber human being by manipulating my anatomy, right?
I'm going to ask you a question
so
real
it
quick.
was a very clear
Yeah.
direction on where they could take that. And the visual aesthetic was like a really nice enhancement to Gear 4, right? Because with Gear 2 and Gear 3, like we see it with Gear 2, but it was just like, oh, he's a little pinkish, right? Gear 3 wasn't ever like a full transformation across the board, right? Like it was always just one limb of sorts, right? Or two. Gear 4, we have a complete transformation where he's physically showing some kind of like design change that is impactful. So I really appreciate it.
Well, Mugiwara, before you go, I want to ask Mr. Waterfree one question.
Go for it. Ask.
If the idea, right, is enhancing an aspect of one's ability, they're basically just blowing air into it, because that's really what we're talking about, right? And maybe
yes,
Mugiwara, maybe to your point, right, like this is an aspect of like the cartoony effects of the latent or I guess prototype or pre-awakening of Luffy's devil fruit. That air somehow enhances these abilities, right? I mean, at least in two instances.
You're going to be surprised. I'm going to agree with you probably more, Cam. But
yeah. The question that I have, right, is like, are we implying then that if Luffy like closes his nostrils and blows into his own head, that he'll basically make himself smarter because he can just blow air into his brain? Like, because then like we are kind of getting into like kind of silly territories. And the reason
he's never going to be smart.
You get what I'm saying? Like, because but the question, right, is
be silly, of
the
course.
question then is like, well, why not? If we're talking about just making it bigger, makes it, because one thing it's like, okay, you're blowing into your bones, right? Okay, cool. You are now stronger, right? For whatever reason, it includes increased mass. I think the issue that I had with Gear 4th is, okay, so now you're just blowing air again. Keep in mind, this is now the second use of just blowing air into your body, which is a little redundant, right? Because now it's like, okay, well, why is this different from Gear 3rd other than the application of hockey? You get what I'm saying? I understand that really the real true selling point and key differentiator of Gear 4th was this: compacting the rubber in order to have it spring forth with more power and force. That was that was the big draw of Gear 4th, by the way. It was him putting his body into itself.
The hydraulic pressure.
Is that hydraulic pressure?
It basically is. Like if you're thinking about the application of air, right? Like that's my thing.
Well, it's
like,
compression. It's ultimately compression, right?
Yes, exactly. And so when you have a different medium to express how the air is functioning, there is value in that, right? Like, so when we saw it with Gear 3, right? Like, we're seeing air being pumped into the bones, right? The bones are already a dense, very solid piece of our anatomy, right? And so if you just pump air into that, you are expanding the physical space in which that bone has to occupy, right? So it was the mass that was really the benefit of air in that scenario. But with Gear 4, the air being used, compression, hydraulic power, right? Like the muscles as a different medium allowed for that to happen. So I don't think that it was, he just used air again and it's just kind of like whatever, right? Like, no, it's a very
we all understand the mechanics of like how it works.
Application.
Sure.
And I believe it was a very smart application of how he could utilize his ability.
I think, here's the thing though, dude. I think that like Doflamingo, I mean, and you can call it like, because, there's obviously a lot of parallels between the New World arcs, right, and post-time skip versus pre-time skip. I mean, it's done purposely. You see arcs like, for instance, Wano is supposed to be kind of like the parallel of Enies Lobby, and Alabasta is supposed to be Dressrosa or whatever, right?
I don't know. We don't know what they're supposed to be.
Okay, regardless, right? Let's just say there are parallels in One Piece, and of course there are, right? I mean, it's the world of One Piece is filled with them. But that being said, it's like it would have been nice to have a moment where Doflamingo, which I think he kind of does, analyzes and says like, how is he doing this? Oh, he must be whatever, like using the compression. And I think there actually is a moment that's like that, but it would have. Yeah, I think it should.
He does that when he was flying.
It should have been felt a little bit more, at least in my opinion, because you think of Lucci analyzing Luffy and using Gear Second and Gear Third. You think of Bueno analyzing Luffy. It's just so clear, and maybe it's just like that moment maybe was there and maybe kind of came and went, or it felt less impactful. But to your point, that is a defining aspect of Gear Fourth, that it is using compression to like create even more power. To be honest, though, the problem with that is that Luffy's ability is ultimately about stretching, right? So when you're not seeing it stretch, because I think there was even instances where like, because he's like compressed his arms, I mean, it obviously like kind of condenses and it looks like a little nub, like obviously his feet look like that. But you're just seeing like when it actually is released, you don't actually, it really should just be like a range weapon. Like it should look like a cannon where he's just like shooting out like effectively like air blast or something like that. Because that is what he does with his feet. But instead you see it like a super bulky arm that, particularly in his fight with Doflamingo, is like moving around and stuff like that. And it just looks a little odd in my opinion. Like there's bends and stuff like that in it. Do you remember that?
That was...
I know you're thinking Snake Man.
Katakuri.
No, I know you're thinking Snake Man, but there are elements. No, because Doflamingo specifically says like it's changing direction. Like there is a moment in like his fight with Doflamingo where like his arm is changing direction in order to like hit Doflamingo. You know what I'm saying? Which is weird.
One thing I'll say is it's fair for it to be that way, and I do think that there were vestiges of hints that Oda was intentionally kind of laying the groundwork leading up to Gear 5, right? With the whole Looney Tune Force
I get
thing.
that.
I'll get to
but
that
I don't want to explain everything
right?
that like doesn't make sense with just like, it was just because it doesn't make sense. It's a Looney Tunes for like.
No.
I don't want to do that.
It doesn't make sense. I'm just saying. So there's two things, right? And I think it expands beyond just the whole Gear 5 conversation.
Yeah.
What it really hinges upon is Vegapunk, right? Dr. Vegapunk, when he gave us the explanation of how devil fruit powers work, it really led into the understanding that, like truly there are no limitations to how a devil fruit can be utilized so long as the individual wielder has the imagination to conjure it, right? And so I'll just leave that where it is, right? In regards to the application of like how it looked, those kinds of things, what I took away from it was that Gear 4 was this beautiful combination of the physical strength of Gear 3 and the speed of Gear 2, right? And so when you see it in that way where it's just, it just kind of shoots out really quick or whatever, right? Like that is the application of him taking everything that he learned from Gear 2, the speed and the functionality of being able to pump his blood faster, into this Gear 4 version, right? Same thing with the bulking size of how he utilizes Gear 4. And we see this especially as we evolve with Gear 4, because we had Bound Man, we had Tank Man, and then we had Snake Man, right?
Sure.
And so but we get to Mr. see this evolution of...
But just a real quick, because this is important. You're mentioning something very important. Gear 2nd is original. It's completely standalone. It is a standalone power-up. Gear 3rd, completely standalone, not based on anything, completely original power. Gear 5th, completely standalone, completely original, like is influenced by nothing, is just his own standalone power. Gear 4th stands alone, to your point, in the sense of it is a combination of the applications of maybe Gear 2nd, Gear 3rd, with the introduction of like the core concept being compression, right? Like it is kind of an amalgamation of the former two and is distinct from Gear 5th. Do you get what I'm saying?
Why is that a bad thing, though?
Yeah. I'm not saying it's, well, I mean, I do think it's a bad thing, but I think it's ultimately less creative is what I'm saying. Like, to your point, why is it called Gear 4th? Why isn't it just an application of Gear 3rd or Gear 2nd?
Well, no, because...
Luffy combined Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd together. He's done that before. And the reason why...
Gear 3rd is lame, dude.
Yeah.
Gear 3rd is not anything crazy, dude.
Mugiwara, I want to get your opinion on that. But one thing I'll just add, and then I want to get to Mugiwara, is... I like distinctly remember, and if you've been a One Piece fan for more than 5 plus years, you remember this moment if you were following the series at this time. When Gear 4th was introduced, the first thing the fandom thought generally was, why does it look so close to Nightmare Luffy? That was the thought. Because it looked really close to Nightmare Luffy. It was basically the same thing. There's videos, you can look them up, that compare Gear 4th and how it really kind of wasn't that distinct visually. It wasn't something that we'd never seen before. But Mugiwara, go ahead and make your point about Gear 3rd, because I know we've been kind of monopolizing the chat.
No, you guys have been making great points. You guys are talking about stuff that we're all thinking about. But when it comes to Gear 4th, for me, when I first saw it, I wasn't obsessed with the character design of it, but I was obsessed of like how it reached that point. Even more so when we found Gear 5th, and when I found out that he had this fruit. I don't know if this equates to everybody, but like a lot of things came together for me, and we've talked to this about this before in previous conversations where like. If you're a DBZ fan, you know more than anything, you start off a fight, you're fighting someone stronger, and you have to go through every single level of Super Saiyan, and then finally that person approaches the villain with the highest level of power, whether it be Super Saiyan 4 or whatever, if you're into the new DBZ, but it was always like a stage level up, and the way that they've been like approaching Luffy now, it's like he has all the knowledge of his previous forms, and he's bringing them in one huge arm coming in Gear 3, in and out of Gear 2, going into Gear 4, moving around in the sky. Like he's able to move through all these levels, which I think is like awesome for general like battle format, but. In general, like, it all came together for me in Gear 5. Like, previously, like, Gear 3, when he became small and all these things, like, these were all, like, tested ideas and stuff like that. And I never thought they were incredible. But it makes sense now that we're coming to, like, Toon Force. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I also I hate the term Toon Force so much because
I mean you're probably the person that like
I know that's what like the fandom says, like I think the fan has been using this for a while. Obviously, it's not an Oda creation, but I think people just ran with it because like Oda said like, oh yeah, it's supposed to be like Looney Tunes or whatever. Like he's inspired by like,
he has direct inspiration from Tom and Jerry.
Yeah,
and all of the old school cartoons and the Looney Tunes and all of that.
Yeah, Mugiwara, go ahead, dude.
One person that I think there's something like left behind through all the characters that are advanced in hockey and what they've represented is there's a character in this story that is at the highest level of armament hockey, and we haven't seen another person do this, and it's Virgo. And we have Luffy, and a big part of Gear 4 was him having Gear 3, Gear 2, and involving his hockey in it, which is what created the swirls and all that stuff. Like, those are all hockey. That's all, like, body hockey. Like, that's not, like, him just creating tattoos on his body. Like, that's him, like, maybe... I don't know how you would conceptualize it, but, like, that's hockey.
Sure.
And, like, we had someone like Virgo who had his whole entire body just, like, covered in hockey. and we haven't seen a single person like that since. And we all were like imagining Luffy might attain this kind of level, or anybody else, but like I think it's weird that we haven't seen anything like that. And
I think that it was sorry, go ahead.
No. That it's just something that I think about. Like,
technically, Luffy has, even in Gear 4th, because I want to keep us focused on Gear 4th, he has basically Haki from basically from like his chest across, not on his head, of course, but chest across, and then his like waist down, because he's got it on his legs. But
why wouldn't he just be fully black?
Because I don't know, it might just be a difficult like application of Haki to apply everywhere, you know, because we also kind of get like information that Haki is like finite. You can use Haki up, right? So maybe it's just too taxing or something. I mean, in the instance of it's actually kind of interesting. So another aspect of Gear 4th, speaking of like, in this case, his exposed abs or whatever, what you get is a moment where Doflamingo kicks Luffy in the stomach, right? And what happens is, which is interesting, because this is not how it normally like goes down, is it like kind of traps his foot, right? And then it like blows it back, right?
Yeah.
It was like a weird kind of like his body composition was like a little bit different. Because it wasn't just like, I'm gonna pull it back up. But like,
it was like an intentional soft zone that
like,
was like taking advantage of the ability to repel.
Armament hockey is something that can be trained. Like, you're Luffy, you have the rubber fruit. Honestly, like him being told you have the rubber fruit will define the way that he goes through his life until he finds out that he has the mythical zone Nika fruit. Like,
absolutely.
If you were told you do amazing in school, if you were told like you had the silly fruit, like maybe he would be able to do like ridiculous stuff. Oh, you have the stretch fruit. It's not even rubber. You can just stretch yourself. Like, he's like told something like anyone else in their life, and you follow along that path, and that's why he's creating all this ridiculous stuff. But eventually he's gonna have this end goal. But in the interim, the stuff that has like whatever Virgo was able to do, we haven't seen a single character do that.
But I think that was because that was his defining trait as a character,
but
right? Where it's like, no, like that's his thing. Yeah, and that's probably another reason why we haven't seen it again. It's like, okay, it wasn't actually as viable as a solution as we might have thought it was.
But imagine Luffy full armament. Like, what are you gonna do? He's made out of rubber, and he's got full black armament. Like, you might as well have. You're invincible.
Nah, somebody with Conqueror's Haki would, or the advanced application of Conqueror's Haki would punch right through him. Just depends on that level. But in regards to the Haki conversation, we can get there. But I want to kind of bring it back to like those three different variations of Gear 4, right? Where we had Bound Man, Tank Man, Snake Man, right? And Cam, to your point, like yes, Gear 4 was an evolution of 2 and 3, obviously, that had aspects of its power reminiscent of what was capable through Gear 2 and Gear 3, right? But the difference is absolutely the hydraulic pressure, the compression, the utilization of the muscles in this context versus the blood and the bone, right? And so with the versatility that we see emerging through Gear 4, I think that was like a very amazing way to see how this one single gear has multiple applications that can kind of revolve depending on the context of the situation, right? Snake Man was my favorite, and I'm sure it's a lot of others as well, especially with that fight with Katakuri. It was amazing. The way that his arm was bending, and of course, at this point, whether we knew it or not, like we were very clearly getting signs of his awakening, right? With the cloud that was emerging behind him, right? Like we started to see the cloak that is familiar with awakened Zoans at this point. but very, very much clear indications of strange applications of rubber, right? Like, okay, like it's one thing to be able to compress your body, to compress your muscles, to be able to, punch very fast and all of these things. To your point, Cam, right? Anything about like bending a limb in the middle of like its trajectory is very strange. That's a very, very strange thing to be able to do. And Snake Man took that to the nth degree, right? But, you can probably try to say, oh, well, that's just fine control of the muscles and all of these kinds of things, whatever. I definitely think that we were seeing clear indication that, okay, some kind of tune force or, that kind of thing is being applied here. I genuinely believe that Oda knew this from the jump, that he wanted to take the power in this direction, because even outside of battles, we have seen very wacky things specifically pertaining to Luffy, right? How fast he digests food, right? Like very absurd things in that way. When his teeth grew back, when he drank milk, right? Like very random things that Luffy does that were indicative of like, there's something really peculiar about this individual. And, I only bring that up to say that if Luffy as an individual was already influenced by the will of this fruit, which we know to be a mythical Zoan, right? And by nature of his character, he is not he's not limited in the mind, right? His intellect does not precede his intuition, in the sense that he might think, oh yeah, I can do this thing, right? Before logically trying to come to a conclusion as why it may or may not be possible, right? And so that's why I think we're able to see Red Hawk, for instance, right? Like no intellectual person with a rubber fruit would think to themselves.
Wait, you think he is being influenced a little bit by the fruit?
Yeah, guys. I know this is like your main contention, but I really want to get away from kind of like, because this is like kind of what I think is like bad writing from Oda, which is everything and anything that doesn't make sense or that is inconsistent can be explained by basically saying, well, it's this devil fruit and it has the ability to warp reality and all this other kind of stuff, particularly pre-awakening. Like, I want to get away from that because I think it does absolve being able to like critically judge what we've seen and maybe some of the inconsistencies or whatever of the fruit, of the writing, of the story, whatever, by basically saying, oh, I mean, like, well, back then, I mean, I know this didn't make any sense, but, because it didn't make any sense, it's really hinting towards the unpredictable kind of reality-breaking, feature.
But that's what I think it was.
But I guess the point is,
like, I genuinely think that But
isn't that kind of like a Deus Ex Machina, though, in the sense of anything that doesn't make sense can be explained by basically like a devil fruit before it's even awakened? It hasn't even been awakened yet. So how can you make the argument of like, oh, well, it's because his devil fruit was, almost awakened, but it wasn't awakened, and
Who's
therefore
making that argument though? Who's saying that?
Yeah,
Mr. Wallenfrey is.
No, here's what I'm saying.
Right?
You
said that we're seeing hints of reality being broken before the fruit has actually been awakened.
Yes, I agree, and that's what I'm saying.
I guess my point is like,
argument that I was,
but it's an argument that can't be argued against because
what fruit?
Why? Oh, here. Okay, I'll give other examples. Right.
Well, I mean, if you're saying anything can happen, I mean, it's like, how do you argue against that point? You get what I'm saying? Like,
I can argue against any point.
Here's what I'm saying, right? Like, I'm not saying like anything can happen to the extent of like, oh yeah, like if it would, like what we got is what we got, right? The story is what we got. I'm just reflecting on the story that we've received thus far, looking at very intentional moments and noticing them as Oda trying to drop subtle hints about what the true nature of this devil fruit is and its powers, right? Because I genuinely believe that Oda knew from the jump that he wanted Luffy's power to grow in that direction, right? And so I think that for the vast majority of the time, he was articulating Luffy's power from this perspective. Okay, at the beginning of the story, I want people to believe that this was the rubber fruit, right? How can I take advantage of the rubber fruit's power while also leading it to this destination of it being this thing all along, right? And
yes,
so we see that kind of progression throughout the story.
But one thing that I'll say, dude, is like, you say that we see this kind of progression, but that in itself is kind of illusory. And what I mean when I say that is like, you only see a progression or a line because, one, there are gaps within it, and then two, like, there's a little bit of willing connection of those lines, and you're basically inputting a context that may or may not be true. And what I mean when I say that, if anybody's confused, is the Shichibukai, for instance, were created basically kind of like, they were supposed to be like the main enemies or whatever. They were kind of created like on a whim, right? Like, I think Oda has been in interviews who said like, I just created them.
Yeah, he said that.
They were like interesting kind of silhouettes or whatever. And then I just kind of threw them in the story. The same thing is true of the supernova. Now you can go back and be like, oh, well, there's so many hints of like the Shichibukai or so many hints of like the supernova or whatever. Oda is not this person who like creates everything from like the inception of, he knows exactly where everything is going to go. Oda is very much kind of like George R. R. Martin in the sense of a style of writing is called like gardening, where he'll drop a lot of seeds. He doesn't know where they're going to go. Sometimes they pay off, sometimes they don't. We can get into a longer discussion, which we're not, but we can get into a longer discussion of a whole bunch of seeds that never paid off. It's easy to connect the ones that like, oh, well, he says it's this, so therefore I can go back and look, and then I can kind of make the connections as to why this led to this. But that isn't necessarily the case. It could just be like,
that's the one.
What do you mean
that's the one for me? Like, that's the only one that I feel that way about. Like, knowing that Oda drew inspiration from Tom and Jerry, Looney Tunes, and all of this stuff.
Sure.
Said that was a core part.
But that doesn't mean that he knew that Gear 5th, because even you can go back and look at interviews. He said, and maybe this is just hype, but he said, I don't know how Luffy is going to defeat Kaido. He says this, right?
He was he was just saying that. He was likely just.
So now he's just saying that.
No, you get what I'm saying? I'm saying like. It's his story. It was very close to that arc where we were gonna get that payoff, right? He was probably just trying to be like, oh, I don't know how it's gonna happen. We'll see.
I mean, that's possible.
Like, that was one of those.
But
moments.
I don't think that Gear 5th was necessarily planned from the start. I mean, maybe, right? But we don't know. I don't think it's necessarily. I don't even think Oda has said, I've been dreaming about, or I've had Gear 5th in mind for a really long time.
I don't think Gear 5 was at the inception, but I do think Toon Force was.
I think the idea that Oda wanted the series itself to be lighthearted,
he wanted to be funny, that weird stuff.
Well, I mean, the whole thing about
that is fact.
Yeah, the whole thing about him being a rubber user is like Oda has said, yeah, it's the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Like, I wanted to choose something that's not super overpowered, that obviously he can get creative with, and that became the medium of, him drawing kind of silly stuff. And that's part of the humor of the series itself, right? Like, there is an element of humor, there is an element, like, so for instance, people will make the argument, oh, well, Luffy must be using Toon Force or the Gear 5th or whatever, like, because he's able to drink milk and heal his body. That's strange, that no one else can do crazy things in the world of One Piece. Well, obviously we know that that's not true, because Usopp has no devil fruit. He is able to take punishing blows. He took literally a face full.
No, wait, why are you talking nice stuff about Usopp right now, dude?
He's talking nice.
Dude,
here's the thing.
I've sound like insane.
Okay, well, you're getting me off track because I'm trying to make a point here. You're good.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
but the point that I'm trying to make is like, there are things that happen in the world of One Piece that defy reality. That in this category, people are like, oh, well, it's just One Piece. It's the world of One Piece. It's the humor. It's like, people do strange things, whatever. Usopp gets hit in the face by a 4-ton bat or 2-ton bat. I forget what it is. I think it's 4, but survives. And they even mention it like, how did you survive that? That's crazy. You're just a regular human. Yeah. But Usopp's able to do it, very right? True. The question is why. People survive deadly blasts all the time. We don't even know what happened to Kaido and Big Mom. So the idea that like Luffy is somehow special and that ties to the Gear, like basically Gear 5th, that the ability of the awakened Hita Hita no Mi model Nika allows him to just do all these crazy things, and specifically allowed him to do these crazy things before he even awakened. Like, I don't know. I think that there are threads that can be pulled that unravel that argument. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, that's fair. But
the point that I'm trying to make is like, it's not ironclad. It's not, even that theory, right, has holes to it. But that being said, I want to talk about Gear 4th and basically what I think was I think we can both agree or all agree Oda was trying to create a new form, and maybe he had Gear 5th, like the makings of it in his mind, but he wanted to have some kind of intermediary between something that was a little bit more distinct and something that obviously is more powerful and more versatile, right? So he's like, okay, I want to play with the idea of compression, right? Luffy is now able to fly because he's basically using the application of Soru with, pumping his legs or whatever to create gusts and whatever, right? And, you have like all these kind of signature moves like the Kong gun and all this other kind of stuff and like, Kong accordion, whatever. I think it's a little bit less interesting because, Gatling is like a signature move. It doesn't look as good. Bazooka looks fine, whatever, right? You have him using compression. You have this form. I think the form is kind of a retread of Nightmare Luffy just in terms of it's him big and bulky and like the proportions are whatever, right? I think visually it's kind of somewhat unsatisfying, right? Or at least not as distinct as maybe Gear 2nd or Gear 3rd and obviously Gear 5th. But then you have effectively the expansion because I think even Oda realized like, okay, so Luffy needed to be more powerful in order to hurt or put damage to Doflamingo, who is basically using reinforced strings plus hockey to protect himself from Luffy's ordinary attacks that just aren't strong enough to break through his defenses, right? Because at that time, like Luffy was using basically Gear 2nd, Standard Red Hawk, all this kind of shit. Mm-hmm. Gear 3rd just wasn't really doing what it needed to do. That's even Gear 3rd with armament hockey. So then you have he needs more power. Okay, here's the answer. Compression, Gear 4th. Then he's able to significantly damage Doflamingo. And it's like, okay, like Luffy's more powerful. He can fly. He's got his other different kind of applications. Cool. He can even change directions. That's what it was introduced, by the way. Cool. He's got strength. He's got versatility. He can fly. Boom, 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 whatever, right? Then we go from that to Whole Cake Island. Whole Cake Island, I mean, obviously you kind of get the introduction right off the bat of Tank Man. Now, you can make the argument, was Tank Man meant to be like a joke? Obviously Luffy, the circumstances are Luffy has to eat a lot of food, whatever, right? Like it's not air, it's food. He just was too fat because he was eating a whole bunch of cracker clones. But, it's kind of difficult to determine if that's meant to be serious. Obviously, he uses the form to ultimately win
the fight. Yeah.
Right? Like, because he, basically repels him. He like sucks him in the gut and then repels him and then kills him somehow. Or not kills him, but like heavily damages him. But it's kind of meant to be like a comedic kind of form, right? But then you get Snake Man. And Snake Man is completely different because it looks completely different. And the application of it is because it is less body mass, and probably we can assume more surface area or less surface area to spread hockey to, he is able to increase his speed, increase his versatility, particularly in fighting an enemy that can predict the future. He has to be faster than his reaction time of him using observation hockey. And that's what we get. We get Luffy kind of circumventing Katakuri's observation use to basically speed blitz with just his arm a whole bunch of different pathways to hit him from directions that like he can't necessarily react to or to predict. So I think Snake Man is interesting because it is a very specific use of Gear 4th. But even still, I mean, just the fact that there is a Snake Man, the fact that there is a Tank Man, the fact that this has like versatile forms kind of belies the point that like Gear 4th was lacking in some way, right? That it needed different forms of it in order to meet the needs of certain moments or to advance its applications or what have you. In this particular case, obviously, like I said, being slimmer, faster, more unpredictable, whatever, right? So I don't know. I think that Gear 4th was always kind of like a doing the project the night before, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying this is obviously what Oda did, but the fact that it was introduced and meant to be so versatile, right? And like just, it's got different forms, it's got different applications, kind of belies the point that I think it was maybe incomplete when it was kind of concepted, right? And was needed to transform in order to meet the needs of new and emerging like enemies.
Okay. I mean,
no other form does that, by the way. Like Gear 2nd doesn't do that. Gear 3rd doesn't. Gear 5th doesn't do that. Gear 4th is the only form that like needs additional forms in order to meet like the moment.
Yeah, but remember, Gear 4 was the only one that actually had forms like that to begin with, right? Like Gear 2 and Gear 3, they were just largely utilized as the application of their power. Gear 4 was introduced with a form, right? Gear 4, Bound Man, right? Like, and so I think it was just by nature of that Gear 4 power that we started to see, those various forms, because that's how it was introduced. But I will say, like, I might concede to the idea that, okay, maybe this was a bit of a do the project the night before kind of resolution, because I think that Oda absolutely, he needed something else to fill in those rising threats before truly revealing Gear 5. And so I will say that it's a combination of both of those things, in my opinion, where, okay, Gear 4 was introduced with the forms in mind, but we did have to move through those forms in order to meet the threat of those rising challenges. And so I'll give you that.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Gear 4, I guess where I ding it is like the visuals. I think the visuals, like, I think that the idea of compression is like a smart advance. I think the other problem is like in the New World, it felt like it completely invalidated Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd because it was kind of like a combination. You almost never saw those again. Yeah. Like, as soon as you get to Whole Cake Island, you really don't.
That's the point. That's the point, dude.
Yeah.
I don't.
You shouldn't have to see them again. Imagine if you were being faced against Kaido and you watched Luffy go through Gear 2. You watch him go to Gear 3, and you're like, why aren't you just going to Gear 4, man? That is what we've been dealing with in anime up until this day.
Well, that's Dragon Ball Z's playbook.
That's DBZ's playbook. Yeah. They're like, oh, I'm not going to try really hard because I like the challenge. Lately, we've been seeing Gear 5 on site. And then now they're also introducing that he is doing Gear 3, one arm. He's doing Gear 4. He's using all of his previous gears. Yeah. Like easily. But
don't you like that,
in movement.
Like I
like it because they've given him already. He has a time limit on Gear 5, so he has a weakness. And within that time it gives him a range that he can stretch that out. He's working within Gear 5. He's using one arm Gear 3. He's shooting through the air, skyrocketing with his like legs in Gear 4. He's moving around. He's going to be going through each gear, and he's going to be maintaining a level of like, so he can stretch out how long he's lasting before he passes out, before he needs to eat, and then he's going to go Gear 5 and be a crazy guy.
I'm going to be real. I feel what you're saying, but I don't know. What I liked about Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd is like they were not made obsolete until, I mean, and it's arguable, but not until like Gear 4th, and I'll explain why. Because they were still being advanced upon, right? Like you saw Gear 2nd, it was optimized where he could just do it without pumping his legs, do it in one arm, whatever. He was able to add in, to Mr. Wild and Free's point, the corkscrew effect plus armament hockey to like add a new level of power to it. I'm sure you could make the same argument because keep in mind, like Luffy's hockey is growing and developing, right? Particularly, we understand hockey blooms in desperate situations, whatever. It's not necessarily true to say that these applications of his devil fruit can no longer be evolved. I'm not saying that you're saying that, but why aren't we seeing, for instance, Geared 2nd with advanced Conqueror's hockey applied to it? What would that look like? Right? What would that look like in terms of speed?
That's a really good point.
Like, what would that look like in terms of speed? What would that look like in terms of power?
That should be his general, like, power level.
Yeah, I mean...
Should be Gear 2nd with hockey
like,
infused.
They should still have specific applications. Like, same thing with Gear 3rd. Gear 4th, ultimately, the application of it should be, okay, like, compression allows me to fly, and maybe it unlocks a little bit more power with, some certain drawbacks. Even the drawbacks, to be honest, like... For Gear 4th and Gear 3rd are basically the same, to be honest. Like, they both turn into, like small versions of it. Like, Gear 3rd, at least he used to, get exhausted, turn into, like, a little baby form or whatever. Gear 4th is the same way. It's the exact same thing. Yeah. Like, I'll go back and look, but I want to say, like, in that little 5 minutes of Dressrosa where he's, like, down for the count and he has to kind of, like, be protected, I think he's like a child. He's like a small, like, little boy, right? Or whatever.
Yeah, and he was small, but I don't think as small as Gear 3.
Gear 5th, obviously, he turns old or whatever, but like Gear 4th, specific. I mean, it's the same thing as Gear 3rd. So like, I think that is one of those things where like...
This is what I was talking about earlier. Like, if you're just talking about the general level of hockey and like your Gear 2nd and what you're going to grow that to, like, why wouldn't Luffy have the level of armament as Virgo?
I mean, like, hopefully we see that.
You know what I'm saying, though? Like, I don't want to say, like, yeah, Virgo's sick. He had an amazing armament. But, like, everyone has that availability, and they're just not showing it. And they're just not going to that level.
The way I look at that is, like, someone...
Virgo was slapped by law, dude.
That's the part.
Also,
real,
how
right?
is Virgo cut? Okay. How was Virgo cut? By Law's fruit.
Law separated him with his devil fruit.
But like, I don't understand how he like his devil fruit overpowered his hockey. Clearly, he had strong.
That's
hockey.
What I'm saying, dude. It wasn't Conqueror's level hockey. He was just armament.
Yeah,
you just use Law's devil fruit, and you can just separate. Like he was just cutting through air. Like,
Law is just overpowered as hell, and like that just doesn't even make any sense. He's able to do that.
He's OP. He's OP.
That's what I'm saying.
But
like,
I think that
the devil fruit is still viable.
They spoke about the downfall of the way that Virgo applies his power, right? And it's because, like, if you're so worried about applying Conqueror's hockey to every single inch of your body, right? You don't get that concentrated level of armament hockey for exactly, right? It's thin.
I mean, now you're talking about kind of like Nen level of like now you're talking about kind of like Nen, where it's like the.
But it's been shown like that. Like we're seeing that.
Yeah.
I feel
like even when like certain individuals or like when what's the guy's name? He uses his head. He applies the hockey only at that part.
Like right here, like in this range, right here, like this.
Right, exactly. Like there's specific ranges and applications of where the hockey is applied in order to strengthen it right there at that moment. And so that's why I was saying that's the downfall of Virgo's power is that he was just applying it everywhere, and that's why nobody else does it.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too deep into Virgo. I mean, he's like such a throwaway villain.
I keep bringing him up, but
he's just not even that interesting.
Just the concept of
he uses a piece of bamboo to like fight. I mean,
I know, but he was able to make that bamboo piece like a flame.
Yeah, he was messing people up.
He's making that thing badass.
Yeah,
but I know that it's not like a good example. I don't want to keep using Virgo against like Gear 4 and Gear 3 and like what's going on there with Luffy's fruit.
I mean, I guess my point is like at this point is like Gear 4th, and I think this is maybe kind of like towards the crux of the argument, right? Gear 4th is now obsolete because of Gear 5th. Gear 5th is like the ultimate power up of Luffy. I'm surprised that Luffy goes in and out of it like so quickly.
Dude, Gear 4th is not obsolete, dude.
We've seen it.
Gear 4th is insanely powerful. Like he could take Gear 4th against Gunko, killing him, and
but
what's his name? They don't have conquerors. Like,
sure.
Against Kaido, yes.
Luffy using Gear 2nd or Gear 3rd should be able to handle like killing him or Gunko, right?
I agree
because just Luffy's hockey level, along with Gear 5th. Like I agree, he doesn't necessarily need Gear 5th, but I think Luffy tends to go into Gear 5th like off the rip. He doesn't do like the power escalation thing, like kind of like he used to with like Gear 2nd. Okay, Gear 2nd, I need more power. Gear 3rd. So I don't know. I think it's one of those things where we've seen Luffy use Gear 4th once since the introduction of Gear 5th, and that one time, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments if I'm wrong, but that one time is when he goes to attack Loki. Haven't seen Gear 4th since. Haven't seen it since.
Yeah.
He goes into Gear 5th.
I mean, he's in Gear 3rd against Loki.
What?
No, that was twice. There was twice. One time, the first time, I think he went Gear 4th.
He uses Gear 3rd when he does... He uses Gear 3rd when he like blows his... Yeah, it's like a little whatever, right?
Yeah, the most
he doesn't even say
Gear 3rd.
He goes into Gear 4th immediately when he like is about to fight Loki. Like, this is when they're first introduced.
Yeah.
And then basically punches and it's like by his head.
But he wasn't even fully like looking Gear 4, was he?
Yeah, he was. He was fully in Gear 4th.
Yeah, I feel like I remember seeing him that way too.
Yeah, go look it up. He was in Gear 4th. But the point being is like
I'll look it up.
And to be honest, I think the reason why he was in Gear 4th is because obviously there are plot implications of him showing and revealing himself to be Nika. Yeah. So Oda just gave him Gear 4th as like, okay, I'm going to use a power of form or whatever just to be intimidating, but it's not going to be the ultimate one.
Yeah.
In any other circumstance,
no one's scared of Gear 4.
In any other circumstance, Luffy would go straight into Gear 5th. I feel like if he knew he was fighting somebody that was like
he has been
a serious threat or intimidating.
He has. Yeah.
So the point that I'm trying to make is Gear 4th is now kind of at least narratively obsolete. And sure, but like I think that to some degree, and particularly the speed of it, because it's just, we had, how many arcs did we have with Gear 4th? We had Dressrosa and Whole Cake, and then Wano, we get Gear 5th.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But that was towards the end, so we got a lot of...
Sure, we got a lot of Wano with Gear 4th, but I mean, to be honest, like, we don't even really see Luffy use Gear 4th that much. He uses it straight up against Kaido when he first sees him.
This is the whole thing that I was just talking about.
He doesn't use Gear 4th at all.
Are you against him jumping into Gear 5? Or are you...
No. What I'm saying...
do you want him to show all of his previous gears?
No. What I'm saying is like... Well, the argument that I'm making is that Gear 4th, because of its construction, right, which is like... The conceit is it's compression. But visually it looks very similar to other forms of Luffy that we've seen before, whether that's...
It lasts long. He has it for some time.
Sure. But the point that I'm trying to make is like... Gear 4th isn't that... impressive, and the speed in which it is replaced, I think, is indicative of that. And by speed in which it's replaced, we get it in its introduction in Dressrosa, which is basically at the end of Dressrosa. We see it used against Big Mom and to some degree Katakuri really largely
all degrees.
Yeah, but all really largely Snake Man, right? But like we see it in its fight with Katakuri, we see it in its fight with Charlotte Cracker. We see it basically in a brief skirmish where Luffy is trying to attack Big Mom. So we could say Whole Cake Island. Sure, it's all, kind of up and through that arc. And then we see it when Luffy kind of blitzes Kaido and then he's put down, right? And we don't even see it, and this is kind of a telltale sign. We do not see Gear 4th, I want to say, at the rooftop of Onigashima. I don't think we see it there.
We do.
I do not think we see Gear 4th there. So we get Luffy using base form, and I have to go back and look, but we get Luffy using base form, and obviously he's like super strong with his Haki use or whatever. I think we maybe get some applications of second or Gear 3rd. Maybe we see Gear 4th. It's very briefly. If it's there, it's very unmemorable. And then obviously he gets put down, and then we see him go into Gear 5th. So I don't think we're going to get much of Gear 4th moving forward. I actually think we'll probably get more of Gear 2nd or Gear 3rd. Because like Gear 4th kind of rests in the spot where like it's a powerful form, but there's a more powerful form which is visa like Gear 5th. If Luffy needs to kind of intimidate somebody, he's using Gear 2nd, Gear 3rd.
They have made it. I'm sorry to come out with such vigor, but they have come at this type of approach of viewing Luffy. He cannot last in that form more than like 15 minutes. Like he is in one facet of the fight.
How long does 5 minutes last in the world of One Piece? That could be like 10 chapters.
Dude, I'm reading chapters that are 30 seconds long. All right, like people are like unbuckling their belt within the whole chapter.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's like the Dressrosa arc of like I just need 5 minutes just to basically recharge. That lasted like 10 chapters. That's,
but
like the countdown. That's like that's such a common thing. Where like, oh, we've got like 2 minutes before the fire flows through Onigashima and kills everybody. It's like within that 2 minutes. You get what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. Yeah. But there's also
like... So like 15 minutes is like a really long time in like a fight in One Piece. That's a really long time.
There's also a totally entire thing where like Oda is showing us him going through these steps of the fight where he's not always gear 5. And the fact that he is going through the recoil of like being in Gear 5 where he has to be on a boat, he has got to be eaten, he's got to be fed by Kizaru, like all of these different things, like they're happening with a reason. I know we've talked about this before where you're like, oh my God, he's got this. Everyone's just feeding him the whole time. Like he's just like, it's just always getting solved. But like they're showing that there's a weakness to being in Gear 5 to the fact that like he is now able to one arm use Gear 4. He's able to use Gear 3. He's able to go into Gear 2. He's going in and out of different situations to conserve his energy from being in Gear 5. And, like, they're not going to show it to you and mind dump.
But here's the thing, though. Let's just be real for a second.
I remember Gear 4 now.
Let's just be real for a second. Luffy's haki is to a point where he doesn't really even need to use Gear 2nd or Gear 3rd, just to be real. Like, even if he needs to intimidate somebody, he can do that through just pure haki use. So he doesn't need to go into Gear 5th. He can do so much. I mean, we've seen him basically kind of hold his own, which I think is still kind of a cheat. But, like, he holds his own. I'll explain. He holds his own against Kaido using Advanced Conqueror's haki. He gets off-screen, which is the cheat that I'm talking about, which I think is BS because he was holding his own. But whatever.
One out of 3 fights off-screen to use fights on screen.
Wano is, like, the king of, like, off-screening fights. I mean, we'll talk about this in another video. I did not care for that.
Sometimes having the off-screen is like, oh, I thought there was going to be something that was dope.
I think it's lazy.
Like,
I think it's lazy. I think Oda was just trying to speed through it, to be honest. I think he's like, okay, let's just off-screen.
I think you're lazy. I've never seen you walk more than a mile.
Okay, anyways.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm messing.
But like, the point that I'm trying to make, right, is like, Gear 4th, I think, served its purpose, which is like, okay, we just got to make Luffy stronger. It's New World. We got to give him a gear. I think that it wasn't as well developed as Gear 2nd or Gear 3rd. It's definitely not as iconic. I think that the application is interesting and it is smart in terms of the compression aspect. But for whatever reason, the way that it's visualized, I think it's memorable, but also like not really that compelling visually. Like it just doesn't look that cool.
I'm not against you on that.
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't.
I feel it
doesn't look as cool. There's just something about it, like just from a design standpoint, that's like it's like 80%. I'll give you a B, but it's not like an A+ like Gear 5th is, or Gear 2nd is, or Gear 3rd is. It's just not.
Gear 4 has some things like the bloatedness with the small head. There's certain aesthetics that I'm not obsessed
like if you
with,
go in, like
I do understand.
Like I pulled up the image, like. I mean, I'm looking at Gear 5th. Like, if you can, look up Gear 4th, look up Bound Man. You can look up Tank Man. Snake Man obviously looks the most interesting. But, I mean, I'm looking at this thing. And maybe I can share my screen. No,
my screen name is Bound Man, by the way. My AIM screen name. So I don't need to look
Let's do this. Okay, so look.
Just bring up AIM?
Okay, look. Okay, so look what I'm looking at. Okay, so you guys can see the screen, right? Okay, so I'm looking at Gear 4th. Look at these tiny little legs. You know what I mean? He looks fat.
His legs are just quick as hell with those legs, dude.
He's got tiny little legs. He's sitting there, and
That's what I'm saying. Like his bounces off of covered body. Like if you're Virgo, like dude, you're not even.
Look at the head.
Like what's the
look at the
concept
eyes.
of haki?
The eyes are straight pulled from Nightmare Luffy. Like
yes, I agree with that.
You know what I mean? Like the body looks kind of dumb. The legs are too small. Like it just looks kind of weird. Like you're looking at it from a visual design standpoint. Like this is the most iconic form of Gear 4th Bound Man. This is like it's this look, right? And it's like okay, like
but I like it.
The mask is kind of dumb. I like the hands. The hands are cool. The mask looks kind of dumb. The legs are too small. They're too stubby. This looks stupid.
I remember this.
This looks dumb. Like this. What is this? I don't know what this is. Like obviously it's him using jet Gatling gun, but it looks kind of stupid because it's like, what am I actually looking at? Are you moving your hands that quickly to form like an after image? Like it just looks kind of stupid. And then you have, let's see. I mean, you get the smoke clouds and stuff like that. I mean, it's kind of like, oh, okay, it's the steam. Like, I think Snake Man looks interesting because it's at least like a little bit more compact.
It was never blowing my mind. Snake Man's way sicker, dude.
Snake Man is my favorite.
Yeah. Snake
of
Man's
Gear 4.
Like, Tank Man just is stupid. This is stupid. This is dumb.
It was
I know this is
something
but
I'm not gonna fight against.
But this is what I'm like.
Dumb and silly are different.
This is what I'm talking about,
and I think it's intentionally silly.
I know it's supposed to be a joke, bro, but it's like this is an actual form of Luffy.
Though, dude. This is the.
This is an actual form, and it's like, dude, like, nah, you're good, you're good.
Sorry.
This is an actual form, and it's like, yeah, look at all this haki, cool, whatever. He's applying it to his bottom half, but it's like he's got to be fat. Even the attack is dumb, like. I think Cracker like charges into him. He gets stuck inside, and then he just basically gets blasted out. And like through getting blasted out, that like damages him. I mean, it's just dumb, dude.
Who just smacked Cracker, by the way? Who just smacked Cracker, by the way, with the Aokiji? Aokiji and Blackbeard's crew, the sniper. What's this?
Van Auger.
Van
Auger. Dude, but Van Auger just slapped what Luffy couldn't do against Cracker. And they're doing... Luffy was in Gear 4.
He's with Aokiji, and then plus there's a cover story.
No. Van Auger was one-shotting them.
Back up from the mic. Back just a little bit from the mic.
Van Auger was one-shotting them. One shot.
I mean, he is a sniper.
Yeah.
So
I mean, well, I don't know. I'm not going to get into cover stories.
Yonko,
I'm not going to get into cover stories just because that is what needs to happen happens for plot purposes. They need to say, oh, okay, well, they're there. They defeat them.
In the anime, that was shown. Huge weakness from Luffy's standpoint, how he was dealing with Cracker.
Well, it's just one of those situations where it's like there are different powers that are, it's like super effective versus others than others. We're like fire is strong against grass, but not as effective.
Yeah, I mean, devil fruits interact with each other differently, whatever. But like, I don't know. I want to focus it on Gear 4 because I think we're kind of wrapping things up. We've been going for like an hour.
But Luffy fought in Gear 4. That's all I was saying. It's weak. Compared to Van Auger's bullet, dude.
Yeah.
Blowing up these Crackers. All right,
but here's my thing. I give a lot of credit to Gear 4, and I do think that is specifically because of Snake Man and the fight with Katakuri. So I might have been unfair in my weight, right?
Do you know why though?
Why I appreciate that?
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I think that is a common sentiment that Snake Man feels distinct and it feels interesting. I think when people think of like Gear 4, obviously they're probably thinking of Bound Man, but like when they think of Snake Man, I would argue probably think of Snake Man more favorably than Bound Man. And yes, they're different, right? It's supposed to be equal power level, but focuses on more speed or agility or whatever. But the point being is Snake Man feels interesting because one, visually, Luffy looks normal. Like he's, proportions, his hair is a little bit longer. He's got like the same kind of designs. He's got like the little steam kind of cloud or whatever. It looks like almost like, it's supposed to look like, like a Japanese kind of god or something like that, right? But like, it doesn't look stupid in the way that the more inflated version, seriously, of Bound Man does. He looks skinny, so it's a little bit more in line with Luffy's form, but obviously he's still muscular. He's got the hockey application on his hands as well as his feet. And then the application of the ability is interesting because it's still using compression, but in a way that like, I mean, with the different direction changes or whatever, it's fast. I mean, it's when we see it is so freakishly fast that like Katakuri, who can see the future, can't do anything about it.
Can't even.
You get what I'm saying? So it just looks interesting and the application is interesting. Unfortunately, I don't think we've ever seen it again. So
he did Snake Man against Kizaru.
Did he?
Is that what you're talking about?
I think so.
Did he?
I think I remember that.
Yeah,
moment.
he did. Yeah, he did. It was brief though.
Okay. Very brief.
It was just an example of him using one of his past gears against quickly.
But yeah, no, like, but to that point, right? Like, I mean, I personally understand that by and large, Bound Man, Tank Man, those initial forms of Gear 4 were not popular as far as the appearance might be concerned, but just on the level of practicality about how the power itself manifested, how it was able to do what it needed to do in the fights where it was present, I'm all for that, Like, I personally, I know I might be one of the few. I was cool with the design aesthetic of Bound Man and Tank Man, as silly as they might have been. They weren't my favorites, right? As far as out of the three forms that we got from Gear 4. But they made sense in the time where they were presented, and I understood where some of the inspirations might have been drawing from in order to give Luffy that kind of form,
I feel that. Yeah, I mean, that's generally just my take on Gear 4th. I mean, I think obviously there are aspects of it that are interesting, right? The compression, the ability to bend the direction of his strikes is interesting. I mean, it doesn't really make any sense, but it's interesting. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I think the main issue that I have with Gear 4th is that it does feel like sometimes it just kind of came and went. Particularly now that we're in this like Gear 5th focus. You can make the argument we had Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd for so long that Luffy evolving beyond needing them, you know, you can kind of accept that, but it feels like Gear 4th really wasn't around for that long. Because, you know, if you're kind of counting up the arcs, I guess, I mean, you have him using Gear 2nd and 3rd in, obviously, Enos Lobby. You go from Enos Lobby, Sabaody Archipelago. Sabaody Archipelago, you see it in Impel Down, you see it in Marineford. And then you have your time skip. Then you see it in Fishman Island. And then you see it in Punk Hazard. I mean, we're with them for a really long... Keep in mind, that's a lot of content and a lot of plot that we're going through with these gears. You can't really say the same thing for Gear 4th. And I feel like the reason why we got Gear 5th so quickly is because Gear 4th wasn't enough to make the cut. So I don't know. I think that honestly, and I think I've said this before, but like I think Gear 5th probably, if Oda had it planned in Mugiwara, I didn't get your hand up, but we'll get to you in a second. Like, I think Oda probably would have preferred to wait to bring out Gear 5th until maybe a little bit later in the story. Because I'll be honest, it feels early for Gear 5th. I like Gear 5th.
Can you close the door?
No, I understand, but when are you...
Like, I like Gear 5th. I think it's... Like, I like Gear 5th. I think it works, but... Like, I think that, if Oda could have saved it for later, like, maybe the penultimate arc... Maybe against Blackbeard, right? I think it would have hit really hard, but it feels like we have it early and we don't really know exactly what to do with it. And I think we have it early because Gear 4th just really wasn't making the cut.
Go ahead, Moogie. You had your hand up.
Yeah, go ahead.
When we're thinking about Luffy's growth, can he go anywhere from where he is right now at Gear 5?
I think so.
Is he going to keep getting stronger?
I think.
Is he going to find something else?
I think what'll happen.
The Sun God. I
think what'll happen is his hockey use will get better in some unique way. Because I think everything is pointing towards hockey use. Just to be honest, even like because I used to think that like his advanced Conqueror's hockey form was like really really strong and he didn't need his Gear 5th. I reread the chapters where Gear 5th is introduced, and he is coding his attacks in advanced armament or in advanced Conqueror's hockey. Like Kaido says that explicitly, so it is superior in its application to just base form advanced Conqueror's hockey. So if Gear 5th Luffy is going to get stronger, I think it is going to be one through just creative application of the power, but ultimately I think it is going to be his advanced Conqueror's hockey usage.
All right, so my next question, I don't want to dive too deep into like what we would be expecting from the series, but do we want to see more Gear 2, Gear 3, and Gear 4?
I'd love to see new applications. I'd love to see new applications.
Do we want them to use Gear 2 against enemies, or are we happy with him being like, I'm a boss, I go Gear 5 and I beat you in 3 seconds?
If we see too much of Gear 5th,
fights?
If we see too much of Gear 5th, and even if it is like super creative, I think that it's going to wear out its welcome, personally.
All right, so here, let me give you a situation.
I think we need less of Gear 5th.
You have somebody that comes from the
going
past.
there,
Yeah, he's gotten really strong, right? He's gotten hockey strength. He's learned more about his devil fruit. He comes across Luffy, and he is stronger than Luffy's Gear 2. And you have an entire arc of Luffy who's been fighting against all these villains at a very hard, drawn-out level. And you just want to see Luffy in 1-2 episodes just destroy somebody and show that his strength is actually turning up. You come across somebody, they come up, you want him to go straight into Gear 5. And you want him to chokehold somebody and own them. You don't want him to go through every single.
I don't think, but it's not like he has to go through them.
Grow, just like all of DBZ, where you're like, go Gear 5 and just own these people, because at the end of the 3 episodes, they always go to where they were previously, and then they win. And it's just a weird.
Here's my thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're in the end games, so everybody that Luffy will face from here on out is going to pose a substantial threat, right? Like, and so it makes
lose
sense.
substantially.
Or lose substantially, which is fair. But like most of the times, if they're losing substantially, they're a non-factor, right? Like they're cannon fodder or can probably be knocked out by Conqueror's Haki at this point, right? But with Gear 5, what I am assuming we will still see as we move forward, to Cam's point, because he said it kind of feels early, which is strange to say to a series that's 1,000 chapters deep plus, right? It still feels a little early, right, for the reveal of Gear 5. Because it's like, okay, well, there's so much more that's supposed to be coming after this. How's the ultimate power revealed here and now? And so I would say my future sight is, well, we're going to see that Gear 5 is that new baseline for him. And we might see a revitalization of Gear 2, Gear 3, Gear 4, right? The applications of how he approached that power, but now in that Gear 5 form, right? We might see a Bound Man, but Gear 5 version of it, right? We might see a Snake Man, but Gear 5 version of it. And I think that, to Cam's point, right, that creative element, and I'm on the other side of that coin, right, where it's like, I won't get tired of seeing that level of creativity with Gear 5. It won't wear out its welcome for me. Like, I think that seeing that and getting all of these variations of what he can do with Gear 5 will be wildly entertaining, more so than any other transformation that I've seen in another anime.
I'm going to add one point, and then I think we should probably kind of wrap this one up. I want to do another video on just Gear 5th. We've, for viewers at home, we recorded a lot of content before we started posting. And one of the things that we talked about, one of the hot discussion topics that we had was whether Gear 5th really kind of worked or not, whether it was really ultimately positive or ultimately negative. And, there's been discussion within the community of like, is it too silly? Does it work? Is it going to take away the seriousness of impactful moments? I think it kind of remains to be seen. I don't think that question has been answered yet, but there is one element that I was thinking about, Mr. Waterfree, when you were talking, which is when Gear 4th and everything else prior to that, like the fights involving that, even if you talk about like Kaido and, basically Luffy in base form using Advanced Conqueror's Haki, the blows are felt and that they're doing damage because they're coughing out blood or they're hurt or whatever, right? In the case of Gear 5th, and this is the real problem that I have with it, it is difficult to tell when real damage is being done, like how much real damage is being done, how much they're actually feeling because of the cartoony effects. And that to me is a problem because, you're seeing them, we're told that Advanced Conqueror's Haki is being applied to all of these strikes. So they should be extremely painful, right? But we're not really seeing that because, when these people are getting hit, whether it's, let's say Egghead, whether it's, Kizaru, whether it's Lucci, Kizaru ends up in like a daze. And like, obviously he's down for the count to some degree, but we also don't really know. This is like maybe meta-analysis, like how much of that is like shame from like, basically killing Vegapunk, right? He's like mentally and physically out of the fight or just physically. We don't really know. Yeah. But the point being is like, there's a little bit of ambiguity in how much damage villains are actually taking through the use of Gear 5th. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's a larger discussion, but that is one thing I would like to see, just getting into the idea of like, was it too soon for Gear 5th? Because like, yeah, it's a great moment when he like breaks it out and he's fighting Kaido, but would that have felt better had it been against Emu? Would it have felt better had it been against Blackbeard? And maybe that lends itself to the idea that, Oda had to break this one out early because Gear 4th just wasn't making the cut for that moment, right? Because, you think about Kaido, it's like, you're ranking villains and, you think about Crocodile, you think of Enno, you think of Lucci, honestly. Kaido, I think because his motivations were a little unclear, to say the least, was he a worthy villain beyond just being powerful, but was he a worthy villain narratively to break out such a goofy, but like, I don't know, inspiring and kind of vindicating ability? Like you kind of need somebody who's like pure evil, you know what I mean? To like make a fool of them. But Kaido was never portrayed as like pure evil and also had a comedic edge to him. So it's like, you get what I'm saying? So I don't know. I mean, I think Gear 4th precipitated, because of its maybe lack of flexibility or, whatever, it precipitated the, I don't know, kind of like prematurity of the introduction of Gear 5th. And honestly, maybe on a villain that it could have been better served against maybe someone else that felt a little bit more narratively tied to the story than just Kaido.
Kaido's just a drunk, dude.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to go back and look at that fight, and it's like, wait, why is, obviously Kaido's like, oh, he's, subjugating.
He's playing around, man.
He's like
serious.
Like, it's like Kaido's just looking for a good fight. I mean, even the way he's introduced, it's like
he wants to die.
He
literally wants to die.
He's kind of introduced as like interesting. You know what I mean? He's like looking for somebody that's like stronger than him, but then he's like also wants to kill, Momonosuke and like subjugate, the people of Onigashima for no real reason. He's helping Orochi, and we don't really know why. And then we gotta get these flashbacks that he's like trying to meet Joy Boy, or like to be defeated specifically by Joy Boy, right? I guess. Yeah. Or at least like he's bored. He wants
to be Joy Boy.
Well, he wants to be like, he wants to die in this glorious kind of like way, I guess. But like we don't really kind of get that. And I think that would be a very interesting, and this is like a way separate topic, but if Kaido had been properly characterized as like, I am from this ancient warrior race, right? Let's call them Onis. And because of that, and because I'm like the last of my kind, and I'm old or whatever, like I am destined to die in like in a great battle, right? He's introduced as trying to start like the next global war,
dude.
Right?
The way that he is introduced is one of the best introductions of a character ever.
But he doesn't really serve that, because I think if his main focus was like, I'm trying to create this war that is ultimately going to take my life, because that is the only way that I want to go out. I want to go out in this blaze of glory. Maybe he's jealous of Roger in the sense of Roger had so much impact because he lived on his own terms and was, maybe he's even mad at Roger for like, allowing himself to be captured and killed by the World Guard, whatever, right? But the point being is like, we don't get that. We just get all this kind of mixed motivations as to why, for whatever reason, Onigashima is important. Maybe it's because it's hiding, Pluton, right? And he's just holed up in Onigashima, despite the fact that he's trying to build an army and, basically start the next war. He seems complacent. And then obviously Luffy comes in and then takes him down. But I don't know. I just feel like there's a better villain for the introduction of Gear 5th, particularly when you're talking about making someone who is very serious and very antagonistic look silly and humiliated. I think I agree. Emu or Blackbeard would have been perfect for that, but we don't get that.
Yeah.
I mean, we will eventually, but it's not going to hit as hard because it's not going to be the first time.
Yeah.
I got to go, boys.
Yeah, no worries, bro.
Boogie Bar out. I wish I could stay forever.
All good, brother. Take care. Love you too.
All right, bro. Peace and blessings. Love you, man.
Peace and blessings. Wild and
good
free.
Talk today, y'all.
Later, Kill Cam.
All right. We will get this up.
Schooled you today.
No, you got me. This is the longest recording we've ever done. Hopefully, if you guys are still listening, thank you very much. Right. Yeah, this has been fun. All right, brother.
All right, y'all. Peace and blessings, brother.
Let's close it out, brother. Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Man, Gear 4, I understand the criticisms. I still love it regardless. Yeah. It did its justice for me.
I mean, it was what we needed for the time. It sucks that we've evolved beyond it. I wish it still had a little bit more application than it does. Yeah. It is what it is. Maybe we'll get some more of it. Like, I feel like it's kind of like a weird album in somebody's discography. It's like, oh, this feels a little bit different, but like there's things that are good about it, but it's like, it's like Drake's house album. It's like there's some gems on there, but like you don't really think about it in like the greatest of his like work or whatever. So I don't know. We'll see. Funny. But we shall see. But yeah, hopefully we get a little bit more Gear 4th. Hopefully it doesn't take like another form to make it interesting, because I don't know, I feel like when you're getting to like additional forms, you're kind of like you're kind of acknowledging that like the original one is not interesting enough. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. We're on break obviously next week, so we'll probably post 2 discussion videos at least. Well, probably definitely 2.
One other thought. Sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
We have not yet seen Oda do something as narratively juxtaposing as what we have seen in Hunter x Hunter. during the Chimera Ant arc and the way that ended. And so let's not leave that off the table as a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, even looking at the chapter, and we obviously had our chapter review already as far as 1145 is concerned, but I'm beginning to think that like more and more, we're not really going to see Luffy and Loki fight. I'm really starting to think that it's just, narratively, it's just not really going to make any sense. Yeah. I mean, I know that that's what everybody kind of wants to see. I just don't know if it'll make sense narratively. It would literally require Loki to, at this point in time, side either with the God's Knights, which I don't think he's going to do, or for whatever reason, maybe it's him trying to escape, fight Luffy seriously, which I just don't feel like is going to work narratively. I mean, it'll be interesting, but because obviously we're going to get to see what Loki does, and he will be fighting somebody. I just don't know if it'll make sense if he's fighting Luffy. And I don't think anybody really wants to see that at this point either. I think they're building a relationship and a rapport between them that is kind of inextricably pointing towards allyship rather than an antagonistic force. I think there was a moment for that. Honestly, that moment was when he stood up, but now he's not.
That was
and
it.
Now
that
they're
was
the
moment.
Yeah, now it's like they're adding like, humor and stuff like that. I just don't think it's going to happen, which I think, I'm fine with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll see Shamrock come back. I don't know. We'll see.
That'd be crazy.
I mean, it seems like they need backup. I mean, there's a lot of power on Elbaf right now. I mean, I don't think they got enough to cut it, but maybe
that
they'll
or
escape.
some other God's Knights that we haven't met yet.
And maybe it doesn't even end in like
Shamrock
a big fight.
was the captain.
Yeah, I mean, because we didn't see Shamrock leave. We can assume he's not there anymore. But I think it does. I think the idea, to your point of like, I hate this term, but subverting expectations. There doesn't necessarily have to be a big fight to like close out the arc. It could just be Zoe, where it's just mostly things that happen, more so kind of lore development rather than, there's a big bad and like they got to fight and, somebody gets defeated or whatever. I mean, particularly with, at least right now, the way that the power balance is stacked. I do wonder if, I know Grandlight had mentioned this in his most recent video, if we'll see Killing Him pull basically imagination or nightmares or dreams or whatever of figures that are strong, because he's already established that, the children are pulling weakened forms of these things. If he's able to maybe do that with Loki, and maybe we get to see a version of Roxy Zebek, right?
That would be crazy.
That would be crazy. Yeah. I don't know if I want to see a fake version of somebody that's like that important.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean? Like I would rather just them live with it. I mean, it almost be like the way that we saw like the ink clone of Odin, which at the time was like very unsettling, because I thought he was alive and I was like, that's the craziest thing that's ever happened like in this arc, and like that'd be crazy if they pulled that off, because it would just mean a lot. But then obviously they pulled the punch and it was just an ink clone. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Anywho, I mean, we'll see. We got a break, but we'll keep yapping. There's other things to discuss. I do want to do a Gear 5th, the deep dive though, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we gotta re-record that. We gotta get that on wax.
Good stuff, bro. No. Good stuff.
I know it's late as heck on your end, dude. It's like crazy late.
It is 1:06. The only reason I was able to keep going this long today, y'all, is because here in Atlanta, it was storming all day, and it was like melatonin from the sky. I don't know. I don't know what was that. I was so tired the entire day, and so I've slept most of today, but I am getting tired again for sure. But
I mean, whoever's still watching this, they're probably asleep right now, because this is like a full-length movie recording. So if you're hearing this, like, say that you made it to the end in the comments, because I'd be very shocked and surprised, and I'd be appreciative too. So all right, let's cut this one. That's the fun one. Obviously, I love these discussions. I think that we have said everything that needs to be said about Gear 4th. For at least
very much
for a while, at least. I mean, we really got into it. So this is a very thorough analysis, and this was fun.
Indeed.
All right, brother. I'll catch you next time. It's your boy Killy Cam. This is Anime Parley.
Peace and blessings. It's your boy Wild and Free.
All right, like, comment, subscribe, do all those things, and let us know if there's anything that you want us to kind of talk about or cover, or how we got it right, how we got it wrong. Give us all the love or all the hate, but just don't hit that dislike button, please. And we'll catch you next time.
Well,
peace.